3, 2, 1. Welcome back to the Go to Hell podcast. Strong opinions, weekly held about Christianity, the church, and beer. I'm your host, Tim Curley, and I'm joined by my co-host, Colton Pierce. Colton, how's it going?
Well, you didn't want to introduce our guest.
I was going to have you just mind your business and...
Oh, okay. Well, I was going to take a minute on my... on how I'm doing, so I was like, are you sure you don't want to introduce her?
Oh, bloody hell.
Do you want to start over?
3, 2, 1.
I believe in Christ, like I believe in the sun, not because I can see it, but by it, I can see everything else. C.S. Lewis.
Welcome back to the Go to Hell podcast. Strong opinions, weekly held about Christianity, the church, and beer. I'm your host, Tim Curley, and I'm joined by my co-host, Colton Pierce, and our special guest, Alec. How are you doing, Alec?
I'm doing as well as I can right now. You know, I'm happy to be here, happy to have some beer with you guys, so got to be closer for that.
Oh, you're pretty good.
Yeah. I was like, did we do a mic check on Alec first? Yeah, you do have to lean in a bit.
Yeah, you probably muted my mic. You don't want to have anything from me said.
That's it? You're just happy to be here? Nothing else?
Yeah, it's nice to just finally be here. I've said that I would come by multiple times and finally able to stop by. It's also because I'm on spring break, so I've got a little bit more time.
Perfect. Yeah, Alec is one of my best friends that I grew up with. We got to know each other in junior high. Really took off with our friendship in high school. We've been together ever since. I think in high school, most of my weekends were spent at Alec's house, just there from Friday to Sunday. And those are great times. His older brother was a mentor to us both throughout our high school years, and so... yeah, it's great to have Alec on the show. He's also a teacher. He teaches in Tulare at the high school that we went to. He's a science teacher. So, sorry to give your background story for you.
No, it's okay.
You didn't seem to be relinquishing any more information other than that.
You know, it's never been on a podcast before,
I was like,
so.
he's on spring break, so... well, I mean, we can give background, so... Tim, how are you doing?
Good, I don't get spring break.
That's it. That's all you got. Golly, we're just leaving everything to Colton to talk today.
No, I'm doing pretty well. Getting ready for Easter. I have no idea what the plans are.
Kiddo's not coming over?
Well, that's what happens when you got kids and they got kids, and the ones with kids don't go to church, and so it's like pulling teeth, and then one's divorced, and so I got it's like herding cats, trying to figure out who's in charge and all that. I'm gonna speak about that in a few minutes, but it'll all get sorted out. It'll be good. I'm looking forward to Easter, my favorite holiday. So, yeah. Colton, how about you?
I'm not doing great this week. I was with you guys on Sunday.
Oh yeah, we're leaving out.
I mean, we were gone. Yeah, we got to have a great trip this last weekend. Went for Pliny the Younger, our beer pilgrimage that we call about it. And so it was a great trip. Had a good time. Super listener Andy got to go with us this year for his first trip.
Time.
Alec was back for the first time in 3 or 4 years. He finally got to go back. And then Eric, Tim, and I got to go this is our 3rd year in a row going together. Correct? Yeah. So that was awesome. But woke up Sunday, wasn't feeling good, and not feeling good from like hangover stuff. It's really just anxiety took over on Sunday. And it's carried through to Monday and Tuesday. Kind of coupled also with depression past couple of days. So it's not been a super great week for me so far. Trying to trying to do some soul searching, just, trying to figure out where I'm at in life and that kind of stuff. I think it's always hard when you have anxiety, like things go through your head constantly. And so you question lots of things and stuff. But I found something yesterday, and I thought I would read it for the podcast. I'm not going to do as well as the person that I found it from, because the person that I saw was actually Michael Caine was reading it.
Michael Caine.
And he's reading the poem "If" by Rudyard Kipling. And it's a great poem, but I don't know why, but I just felt like it was worth reading at the beginning of our podcast today before we get started. So, yeah. So, like I said, the poem's called "If." And it starts with, "If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you. If you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too. If you can wait and not be tired by waiting, or being lied about, don't deal in lies, or being hated, don't give way to hating, and yet don't look too good, nor talk too wise. If you can dream and not make dreams your master, if you can think and not make your thoughts your aim, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two impostors just the same, and if you can beat to hear the truth you've spoken, twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools, or watch the things you gave your life to broken, and stoop and build 'em up with worn-out tools. If you can make one heap of all your winnings and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss, and lose and start again at your beginnings, and never breathe a word about your loss. If you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they are gone, and so hold on when there is nothing in you except the will which says to them, hold on. If you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings, not lose the common touch. If neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you, but none too much, if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it. And, which is more, you'll be a man, my son.
That's really nice.
Thanks. I don't know, I just, I'm 29 years old. I still have a lot of growing to do. A lot of maturing still left to do. So, yeah, so that's how I'm doing. I'm learning. I'm growing. Looking forward to better, less stressful days, but, sometimes we go through that, so.
So, what are we drinking?
Sitting here drinking beer, talking guys, killing time, living life.
All right, Colton. So, what is the Go to Hell podcast first beer of the week?
We're having an R&D. Was I just like too solemn there? Is that just like it was just too much of a change? I'm sorry.
It was heavy. It was heavy,
sorry.
man.
I'm sorry.
No, don't be. Don't be.
We're drinking a.
What does one does not know what to say to Rutgers Kimpley, so it is what it is. So,
Well, some people say that he's racist. So.
weren't we all?
I was like him and every other British author. So I mean, all right. We're drinking the R&D series, which is an experimental series from Russian River. We've drank a couple of them on the show, I think, or maybe just one that we were.
I think we
get.
brought one or two back last year. Yeah, for sure.
But we are drinking the R&D IPA number 40. We got a huge hop blend here, hopped with Amarillo, Azacca, Citra, Mosaic, Simcoe, and Strata hops. I haven't taken a sip yet. I think the other boys have, so you guys can.
I am livid that this was not on tap.
Yeah, it's
Really
phenomenal.
This is one of
smells
the
really
best
good.
beers I've had in a long time. Of course, it's probably a good thing it wasn't on tap because I might have been staggering out of Russian River at
Oh yeah, wait. What's the ABV? on
Were
that?
we not
See-
staggering out of Russian
12:30.
River?
Oh, it was pretty good. I was fine.
Is there? There's got to be an ABV posted. That's what's
It's
legal. Oh, it's only 6.5.
6.5. Oh my goodness, this is amazing.
Yeah, it is really tasty actually.
Citra and Simcoe and Strata, I think, are three of my favorites that
This is-
come in pretty hard with that. It's just a mellow taste.
Yeah, man.
It is. Oh my goodness.
You enjoy every second of those, man. Shout out to Tim for buying.
That's not going to Kauai. You have to come to my house to drink that.
They're not even gonna make it to the weekend.
No.
Yeah, so that's what we're drinking. We've got a couple more beers lined up for tonight, but some goodies that we took from the weekend.
Yeah, so the pilgrimage was a lot of fun. It always is. It's always very tiring too. Sunday is a very solemn experience. Everyone's worn out and tired, maybe hungover. I managed pretty well.
It's probably the 4 cups
I
of coffee you had that
started in the morning. Well, on Saturday, I started in the morning before we left with a hydration pack, and then after we left Russian River, threw down another hydration pack. So I was making sure I was well hydrated. But the three of us made it up to Sonoma. Well, we stopped at our favorite spot in Turlock, Dust Bowl, had lunch, had a beer or two. Was convinced that I get given the wrong beer, but apparently not. I don't know what's going on.
It was the same beer.
Made it up to Sonoma County. First stop was Hen House. Sorry, Hen House, might not be going back. We've talked about it before on the podcast. I think we've mentioned a funny story where Nolan, who's been on the show a couple times, had been refused service for 2 beers, basically one time, 2 beers at the same time, and then knowing that was the supposed policy of the tap room, he drank one very quickly, and they told him no, still no second beer for you. So, but we've always enjoyed it. The beer's fantastic. They have the place is a little weird. They have their IPA series is all conspiracy theories, like Stanley Kubrick filmed the Apollo landing and it didn't really happen. That one's called Kubrick's Landing, and there's one about the birds being all robots and a bunch of other stuff. But was it last year? It was last year on one of our trips, either Sonoma or the beer trip, that they had the room set up like Edgar Allan Poe's library.
Oh yeah, I think that was Sonoma.
I think it was Sonoma. And it just gave it a very odd vibe. It was very dark in there, and
Yeah, we had one beer and quickly left.
so
And we sat outside, and that's also usually what we do at Hen House.
Right.
We go in, we order, and then we sit outside. It was raining this year, so we weren't able to sit outside.
right. So this
pretty much-
year they had Ouija board pieces with pentagrams and goats in robes, goat heads and robes. So
red
a
mark on
goat,
the skull.
yeah, goat skulls. So it was very, very off-putting. I don't think I'm going to go again.
Yeah,
so.
we knew that they always leaned into that, and we knew that. Well, we didn't know that the first time that we went. We were like, "Oh, this place
No.
has great beer," and they had kind of. They were always kind of silly with their name stuff, and breweries can lean in as much as they want into their subject. Like you go to what's the one that you get, Able Baker, and
Yeah.
they got rubber duckies all over the freaking place.
Right.
You know, you can lean into it as much as you want. They really lean in. They the first time we went there, they had their what is apparently their rotating session of IPAs, kind of similar to the R&D, kind of those experimental ones, are named after conspiracy theories, and they're really funny. They taste really good, and you guys tried it out first. I think we had just gotten a couple of cans, and you guys had tried it out on Thursday night when you guys were in Sonoma, and then you're like, "Oh, we got to check out this place, Hen House." And
Yeah.
so we all went, and honestly, had no vibe. Like, it wasn't like, oh, there was like a weird vibe or anything.
No, they were just soup Nazis when it came to pouring beer.
And then eventually, yeah, as we got to keep going, it was apparent that they kind of leaned into this. And then when we went to the Edgar Allan Poe one, it was like we quickly drank our beers and we left. It was just a scene from The Raven. The whole room, like he said, it was dark, but it was like red tinted dark. Like it was.
Yeah.
It was supposedly like you were like if you've never read The Raven before, the idea is that he's in hell. And so he was, and I think we might have said this on the podcast.
Yeah. Well, you might have, yeah.
And so it was just kind of this place where you're just like, I don't want to be here. And then, yeah, then this time we go and we had been joking about it on the way up. We were like, all right, you're ready for a bloodletting and like, you know, get your ritual circles ready and all that kind of stuff. And then we get there and everything was fine. And then we sit down and yeah, we got our coasters, our Ouija board pieces, and it wasn't too bad until we flipped them over, and then it was like, all right,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
And it says something about the occult.
It
on
had
there.
it had the word occult, like spelled OAKULT. So they're doing a wordplay on probably oak barrels for one of their beers and stuff like that. But I just, our buddy Eric and Andy hadn't made it up yet, so they skipped the trip. And when we were describing it, our friend Eric was just he was as equally creeped out as I was. He's like, yeah, I don't dabble in that stuff. We might not be the most spiritual Christians, but I don't dabble in the dark forces either. That's just no. It is a thing, I believe. So,
which is a bummer.
I haven't. I was telling my mom about it, and she said, "So you're going to buy the beer anymore?" And I said, there's nuances to stances, so I still might buy some beer every once in a while, but I am not going back to the location. For sure.
Yeah, and I agree. I'm not like, I don't want to be like fully throw the baby. And I mean, actually, you know what, guys, this could be our mission field.
Absolutely, there you go.
Yeah, we got to keep going back. Actually,
We're gonna hand out tracks.
yeah, we'll be like, here, we'll have a beer. And then here's the Go to Hell.
Can we walk in with the sandwich
you know what's
board
funny,
signs
though?
that
You know what's
says you're
funny,
all
though?
going to hell?
Is if we're being honest, I do feel like we kind of sometimes run into that issue with other Christians and our name for our podcast.
Oh, 100%. If you listen to the show and you love the name, I do admit sometimes, like, I don't know that was the best name for the show, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I don't think so. I'm glad you think so too sometimes because there's like
It sounded clever at the time.
Yeah, and then now when I go and I talk with people, and then they're like, especially anybody that's like, you know, of a certain sect of Christianity, and they're like, oh, I'd like to listen to your podcast, and I tell them what we talk about, and they're like, yeah, so what's it called? The Go to Hell podcast.
I don't even want to search that up.
Yeah, and maybe
I blame our pastor because he was instantly loved it.
he was like perfect.
Love it. Don't change it. Go with it. So we
Yes, we left Hen House.
left a hen house and then went and had Chicago style pizza in Petaluma, and it was fantastic.
If you live in the Petaluma area and you are listening to this and you haven't tried Old Chicago and Old Town Petaluma, which Old Town Petaluma is super cool.
Yeah.
It's up in a hotel, an old hotel building.
Yeah.
You got to walk down a hotel hall and hopefully don't run into any twins on the other side to go to
Yes,
the restroom.
exactly. It felt very much like The Shining.
What happened?
The hotel.
I
It
said
was.
it's not like I was making a Shining reference.
Oh, I
was
thought
expecting a
you
kid.
You like
saw.
come around the corner
I was
and you just
expecting a-
long hallway
Yeah.
to go use the restroom.
Oh.
I was expecting to
off to
see a
a-
kid racing a tricycle. At me.
Yeah, exactly.
And I had extremely high expectations, and because Chicago style pizza is very hard to find, I've been disappointed greatly most of my life, all the time in Chicago. For Chicago being known for that style of pizza, you people are really bad at making Chicago style pizza. It's so awful, most of what I've had. So it was fantastic. And then from there we went to.
Well, don't forget about the garlic bread either. The garlic bread.
yeah,
is also-
garlic bread was really good.
And then from there we went to Moonlight.
And we went to Moonlight, our favorite place up there. wrapped up the night, and then next morning got up at 5 in the morning, got down to wait in line for Pliny the Younger, which was fantastic this year. Stayed there a couple hours, and then did our normal.
I think it was better than last year.
Oh, it was.
I was like,
And last year I wasn't last year it wasn't my favorite. I liked it, but it wasn't my favorite. I think it grew on me, but this year was very good. Very drinkable. Had a few more beers. Everybody ate some food, then left there. Went to our favorite liquor store, Willoughby's. Spent a bunch of money in there. Then went to the retirement home, passing as a brewery. The Oaken Bucket.
It's Shady Oaks.
The Shady Oaks, yeah.
Or Shady Oak.
Shady Oak.
And we have decided that we will not be returning. Listen, they could have really good beer of a different sort.
They are highly rated, so I think for the beers
that we're looking to consume.
it's not our favorite, but it's a highly rated brewery in the area, so it's on the list of places to go to. So
even just have one beer and go and enjoy the arcade, I think that's kind of just a retro throwback that not a lot of places do either.
And it's just kind of because it has that kind of barrel house kind of. I mean, it's a much more open building than barrel houses is, but it's a nice place to hang out. It's just the beer that we were looking to drink. It was not in that area. It's not worth your time. Like with all the other good stuff that's out there, it wasn't worth our time. So, and we went there last year, and they didn't have any IPAs, and so I was adamant because like one of our guys from last year, Eric, was like, "Why the heck are we going back to this place?" And I was like, "Well, they said they didn't have any IPAs last year. Let's go and let's try their IPA." Because yes, we didn't like their beers last year, but let's go and see and let's give it a try. See, because they might have a really good IPA and we just didn't know it. That they don't have it. Eric was right. I'm sorry, but yeah.
It probably fits a nice market up there since IPAs are so heavy around that area.
You think with a name like Shady Oak, one, it's a retirement center, but also that they probably specialize in darker beers.
Yes.
So.
And then from there, went to a place we'd never been to, but we'd had their beer before, Old Possum, another highly rated spot and one that is recommended to go to, but we just never made it on our previous trips, and it was great there. Food was pretty good. Beer was fantastic.
Yeah, beer was really good.
Looking forward to go back there and try some more beer. This was kind of, on a lot of these spots, it was kind of, one, because Andy hadn't been before, and I think we're trying to hit in new spots. We're trying to fit in Old Possum. There wasn't a lot of drinking a lot of beer and trying all the different things. And I didn't see a flight at Old Possum. If I had, maybe I just didn't notice it. Or I might have gotten that, but maybe next time.
I definitely couldn't see it at that point.
And then, made it back to Moonlight and wrapped up that evening. And then the next morning had breakfast at our usual spot, which is Cafe Mimosa. Always a good breakfast. And then ended the trip on our way back home, back to Dust Bowl. So
yeah, only regret from the trip was didn't get Cooperage, because I do like that spot.
I do like Cooperage. Yeah, we didn't get in Cooperage, so.
And I don't know have you tried any Cooperage?
I don't think so.
They have like so many West Coast IPAs there. That was like the first thing that we were like, hell yeah, when we went there.
Yeah, and then it was like
7 different West Coast IPAs to choose from.
I don't know what I'm gonna get.
And they were all great names too, so it was like a lot of fun.
Were there any cans of that at Willoughby's?
I didn't even look at the beer this year. Willoughby's usually has a very good selection. They usually have a bunch of in-house, I know for sure. Mm-hmm. I didn't bother. I was hunting my bottle of whiskey that I wanted, so once I found it, I was ecstatic.
Were you looking for beer at Willoughby's?
No, I was already drinking beer at that point, so...
Oh, got you. I did go looking through the beer aisle first. But yeah.
The selection's amazing.
Yeah, it's really great. Yeah. I was happy to be there. It was great. Made it home.
Barely.
Several $1,000s in debt. No, just kidding. With lots of great food, lots of great memories. Always what's good about those trips. I always say, and I think I said it last week, but I'll say it again. Is Pliny the Younger worth the 6-hour wait? I still say no. No matter how tasty it is. If it was just the beer by itself and by myself, it wouldn't be worth it. But it's the time that you spend with your friends and hanging out and getting to go out and have a guys trip and an experience. And yeah, it's great sitting underneath a tree and it's raining on everybody else. And and Alex hung over as hell, sloped over in his chair. It's just some of those things that you're going to talk about for years to come, where you're just like, last year, remember when this or whatever, and blah, blah, blah. And those are the good things to remember. So, yeah, it was good.
Did you guys notice when we were inside at Russian River, there was a guy at a high top table by himself the entire time, and I thought, did you wait in line by yourself? That's insane.
Was he at the bar top, or was he?
It was at a high top table on your way to go to the bathroom.
Oh yeah, I did see that. Wait, but he was just standing, right? Maybe he was just standing at first.
Yeah, I thought he was standing. He had a table. He was choosing to stand. But every time I walked by, there was nobody there with him, and I thought, that's nuts. I mean, I made it clear I wouldn't do it with just two people. There needs to be enough communal people, where a group of people where there's stories being told and things to laugh about and somebody keeping the conversation going. But
well, and so
maybe he had a book, or I don't know.
Now, what I will say is the year that I did it with two people, which was with Nolan, we just made friends with other people in the line. So
right,
we made friends with probably like 20 people. We all got like each other's Snapchats and all that kind of stuff. We just had a blast talking and hanging out with people. But we waited 8 hours that day because we didn't get there till like 9 a.m. or whatever. So
right.
we were in a pretty long line, and that was pre-COVID. So, but yeah, it was good stuff.
All right.
No, that'll be a plethora of stuff.
He's like, well.
All right, Colton, what have we been listening to this week?
So, as I talked about at the beginning of the podcast, I've not been in a great headspace. But on Sunday, you had a band on, and I was like, hey, what's the name of this band, and what's their most famous song, or whatever? And it was the Gin Blossoms.
Oh, yeah.
And so I've been listening to quite a bit of their stuff this week. Not saying it like makes me like happy or whatever, but I remember listening to it growing up. My dad played Anywhere You Go. It was like one that he played a lot in our house. And then because Apple Music just kind of pairs stuff with other things, I've also been listening to the Goo Goo Dolls a lot. So both of those have just been really good to be listening to. So I'm a big fan of the Goo Goo Dolls. Always have been.
Mid-90s pop rock.
Yep, that's what I've been listening to. So
Very cool.
yeah, it's been great for me. So, how about you, Tim?
Well, we listened to it was jukebox in the car, so, but
I know you're a jukebox hero.
last week before going on the trip, and then when I came back, I've been listening to Lisa Loeb and her first album, Firecracker, which I'm a big fan of. Just a really good little kind of pop singer. She plays acoustic guitar with her songs, and she's got a studio band behind her, but really like her voice. Like she writes all of her songs. It's a lot of fun. I think she did like 2-3 more albums after that in terms of actual pop rock music. Everything after that, I think she must have gotten married and have children, because she's got a lot of children's albums. She does music for kids, so I'll keep that in mind when my granddaughters are complaining about my music and say, all right, shut up and listen to this.
You know that's what the guy, the lead singer from Survivor, went and did?
No.
Yeah, so after he stopped, after, Eye of the Tiger was what it was, he got involved at like a preschool in New York, and he just like writes kid songs, and that's what he does.
Well, now
I is for tiger. What? No.
Yeah, so I really enjoy her. She's very good.
And what is that time frame that she was singing?
Her album came out in early 90s.
Okay, I was gonna say mid 90s.
Like
but that makes so much
90,
sense.
91, 92, somewhere around there. It's when it came out. The Firecracker album. It's kind of like Jewel. If you like Jewel as well, kind of the same kind of thing. Kind of folky pop rock.
Oh, okay.
I like Jewel too.
Oh, so you're listening to 90s pop rock too?
Yeah. So how about you, Alec?
I kind of took a turn. So after the weekend, we were listening to a lot of rock. But one of the things I've found over the last couple of years, after like talking with Jake Pitts and really get into it, I've become more of a fan of reggae.
Oh yeah.
Especially newer bands like Island, reggae's good, but also with the new Marley movie that came out, I started listening to his Praise Jah in the Moonlight. And I think just as a Christian too, taking a step back and coming away from the American standard of what we use as God, and also trying to look at what that word means and the expression of who God actually is. Mm-hmm. And so that's been a real big song for me recently, just because it talks about praising Jah in the moonlight, and it's enjoying the presence of just the awe and everything like that. So it's a very interesting song, at least in my perspective.
Just enjoyable.
Yeah. I think reggae too, that's other than smoking and dabbling in marijuana,
It's okay.
people don't realize that.
Tim brings up somebody who does LSD like once every 2 weeks. So.
What? What are we talking about?
Your bands.
I mean, we're all hop fans here, so just a different version of them.
Okay, before we get on to the next thing while we're on music, if you're listening to this and you're wanting a good recommendation for music coming into Easter week, kind of want your headspace set for Sunday, I recommend David Crowder Band's Church Music album. It's fantastic. It's David putting his spin on a lot of hymns, and so it's a big favorite of mine. I know it's a big favorite of our friend Eric. He really loves it, and so it's got, yeah, like I said, it's got some of his songs, but it also has some hymns on there, like what's the one I'm thinking of? How He Loves, I think, is one of them. So, or any David Crowder for that matter. So,
Always listening to David Crowder it's one of the best things that you can do for your soul.
yeah.
Any of his albums, Remedy, Illuminate, Collision, or 3 + 4 = 7, any of those albums are S tier. That is peak David Crowder Band. Also, emphasis on David Crowder Band. He did go solo and did a little bit of solo work. But if you're looking for that early to mid thousands sound of David Crowder when him and the band were at their peak, those are the albums you'll be looking for there. So.
All right.
I meant to talk about it the other day. I think we overlooked. Do you guys remember Sean McDonald?
Oh, yeah.
Gravity. I don't know why I just thought of that, but I used to love him. I don't think we ever actually acknowledged him.
I thought you were going to bring back up Rebecca St. James.
Oh, no. No Rebecca St. James.
She went on to be like a senator in Australia, guys.
Did she prosecute Brian Houston?
Brian Houston. Yeah. So, anyways, yeah, I do remember him. Yeah, it was kind of weird. We had a conversation at Dust Bowl about Christian bands that we listened to.
Jars
I was like
of
a couple
Clay.
weeks ago. Yeah, a couple weeks ago we had Andy on the show, and he said that he was listening to Audio Adrenaline. And so that was kind of like some of those where we were bouncing off, where we're like, oh yeah, remember this band and this group and this stuff. And I don't know if much of us could name current bands that are singing stuff on Christian radio. So if you're ever sitting there and thinking that we never listened to Christian radio, trust me, we did at one point, back when it was good.
Yeah.
Back when they cared about the music.
Hillsong United.
Oh, yeah, that's all I know nowadays.
All right. Well, we'll do one quick What the X?
What the X?
And then we'll get into the main topic. So,
What the X, by the way, for Alec, who's a first-time guest here, is it's just Tim reads something that he found on Twitter, and we just respond to it. That's all.
Oh, I'm so ready for this.
I was like, sometimes they're funny, sometimes they're just like, what the heck was this person thinking? But we get all of our news from X, so that's.
Yeah, apparently.
We can't pay
platform.
for articles, but guess what's a free platform? X.
It's finally gone back to what it was.
As long as you don't care about not having your blue check mark or whatever.
Love to see the left and the rights fighting against each other in the comments over who's doing the right thing.
The answer is always your mom.
I don't think I've seen as many dead people as I have this last week on Twitter.
You see dead people?
Oh my gosh, they have no filter on what you put on there.
Is that still a Shining reference? It's still a Shining reference, right?
Yeah.
Oh no, that's the ring.
Which
No,
one?
I see dead people.
I see dead people?
No,
Shining?
it's
The Grudge? I think it's The Shining. No?
I don't know.
Sixth Sense.
Oh, is it The Sixth Sense?
Oh, yeah. Sixth Sense.
Oh, okay.
I see dead people. Haley Joel Osment
Yeah, there we
saying that to Bruce Willis. Yeah, of course. Okay. So, this week it came out that Elevation Church in North Carolina, apparently it's a big church run by Pastor Stephen Furtick, who's a big, well-known pastor, motivational speaker, I think, in the genre of Rob Bell and some of these other big pastors. His church, they didn't make an announcement. Their digital content director was being interviewed by something called Pro Church Tools about how they use church social media to draw and engage people to services and whatnot. And during the course of the interview, I think they were trying to be mindful of. I haven't heard the interview. I'm guessing that they were probably having a discussion about staying away from church words, which is something a lot of pastors are working on. I know when we were at our previous church, it was being actively worked out in front of everybody. Like, you could tell they were trying to stop using so much churchy language, and while at the same time also not assuming everyone knows who Paul or Peter is. You explain it. You just assume I need to the one person in the room who doesn't know anything about the Bible. I'm not going to just say, hey, we're going to read from Acts, and it's written by Paul, and you got to explain what Acts is. And so anyway, I imagine they're having this conversation, to which she says, when I think about how I'm going to talk about Easter, I'm thinking about how I'm going to talk to people far from God, because that's the thing that matters most to us. Most to us. Let me do that again. When I think about how I'm going to talk about Easter, I'm thinking about how I'm going to talk to people from God, to people far from God, because that's the thing that matters most to us. For us, the most important thing on Easter is inviting people to church. This means reaching people far from God. Okay, you already said that. So we're not going to use the words Calvary, okay, resurrection, or the phrase blood of Jesus. Yeah, don't use that phrase. We won't use language that will immediately make someone feel like an outsider. So this blew up on X like you wouldn't believe. Somebody wrote, there ain't no Jesus without the resurrection and the blood he shed on Calvary. Such blasphemy, watering down the word for non-believers, does nothing for anyone, makes them lukewarm, repent. Another one said, if it's true your church is taking if it's true that your church is taking away life-changing scriptures, then who are you people? How is this blah 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 blah. So it went on and on and on. It blew up, and so people are immediately looking to, again, excommunicate them from the church and all that kind of stuff. So I even heard a podcast today that isn't even a Christian podcast. 3 of the people on it, 3 of the 4 profess to be Jesus followers, but it's a politics podcast. And even they were all worked up about it. I don't understand what the controversy is. She's not saying that they're not going to talk about the resurrection during the service. That I would say is then why bother? She's just saying it's not going to be in an invite. So, am I missing something? Or is this just another thing where we're in a world where everyone's just looking for some reason to feel aggrieved and worked up about something and get out the pitchforks and dunk the witch or burn her?
I feel like
Who would put blood of Jesus in an invitation to begin with? I mean, I could see the word resurrection might be something in there. But again, that's an invitation for... I agree with her. That's one for church people.
Yeah, and I think you got to look at the semantics of it all too. Is like resurrection is a very easy word, but when we start talking about blood of Christ, they don't understand what the meaning of it is in terms of, especially introducing it to someone who's either a non-believer or someone who's possibly even fell out of the faith too. And you just start talking about the blood of Christ, and they're like, "Oh, this again? Why are we discussing this?" And so this was Stephen Furtick that
It's his church, and it's his. Her name's Nikki Shearer, and she's the digital content director. And so, it sounds like Pro Church Tools is some kind of publication or something where they're talking about, the ins and outs of how to do church. They probably have articles on. There's all kinds of software that's made within the church industrial complex for worship slides, music. There's specific accounting software made just for churches. So I imagine they're just kind of going through like, how do you market your, for Easter? Well, we don't put, the point is to get people there.
yeah.
Colton. I mean, I wouldn't be offended if they put it in there, but I also see the point.
The invite to mine and Tim's house church this week is everybody pick up your cross, toss on your crown of thorns, and meet us at Golgotha.
That's hardcore.
That's what we're sending out to people. I'm gonna go put that on doorposts right now. I'm gonna go and print that out. I'm gonna make it nice and red. And just
If you can't carry your cross, your faith
Passover
isn't
red.
strong enough.
we're gonna go and talk. Yeah, actually, we're just gonna paint blood over the top of
Over the top of the doors?
the doors, yeah.
We're going to go all in.
Yeah. I even think that on this podcast we may speak a little too much Christianese. I don't.
Oh, for sure.
I know. Well, and it's hard. You get trapped in it. And yeah, I think when you're trying to invite somebody to church, and I mean, like, don't bamboozle them either. Like, you know what I'm saying? Just be like, oh, hey, you want to go with me to this awesome party on Sunday? Yeah, there still needs to be an element where if you're trying to invite somebody who's a non-believer to church, there should be a little bit of a background to what it is that you're, so that way they know what they're being brought to,
Sure.
or what they're signing on to go for. But even if you put like resurrection or even that kind of stuff, I still feel like that might, like, just in an invite or something. I don't know. And I mean, if we're talking about on a Sunday morning, I've heard lots of pastors that don't even necessarily spend a lot of time talking about the resurrection.
Well, you and I think, talked about this last year where
Like, how
too
many times do they
many
talk about
churches
freaking
focus on the
Thomas?
cross.
Or how many times do they talk about Thomas all freaking day?
Right.
Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's, which is fine, but I'm saying, or they focus on the cross. And it's probably because they didn't have a good Friday service, and so they gotta
Right.
get it out of them now. But it's, the Christianese thing is kind of interesting. I don't think that anybody needs to be upset at this lady for what it is that she's saying. There's nothing that she said that was wrong, in my opinion.
Well, it's not like an attack against the church either, in terms of, they're failing at telling people about the resurrection by keeping these words out.
I still think it's like that idea of that for like the longest time, and there's people that feel that way. I know somebody in particular that we talked about before that that they were always, no, we can't whitewash things. Like, we have to tell people. And that's where you have those people that are super upset about homosexuality is, like, people are allowed in here and they're homosexuals. We got to tell them, you know? Like, it's the same thing. It's that idea of we have to tell them, we have to tell them. And it's just funny because, you know, you and I are reading this book over here, and as I said before, and I said it last week, is actually that's a fairly new thing for the church, is this idea that we need to go out and tell them. Like, I know that that's not, if you read the scriptures, that may not seem the case, but Calvinism had basically asserted that, you know, we were like the Jews, that you were just kind of like born into it. There's no, like, the Jews don't do evangelism.
No, that's one of their issues with Christians. That's one of their dislikes of Christians. Not like they hate Christians, but Christianity and Christians is they do not get the whole evangelism thing at all, and they find it very off-putting. There's an episode about it in Curb Your Enthusiasm where they talk about it. But yeah, no, they don't do it, and a lot of religions don't. So I don't even know that historically Islam did it. You know, Islam did a lot of proselytizing by just conquering, and which frankly Christianity did for 1,000 years as well. So
Conquering and reproducing.
right, and so yeah, this idea of evangelizing is a very modern,
Very modern and American concept.
yeah, particularly American, but Anglo world for sure, spin on Christianity, and I think that's a good point too, because I think a lot of people who are the most worked up about this still probably live in maybe the South, where it's still a Christian culture. There's a lot of things that are still kind of not allowed, where in California, even in our part of California.
Yeah, you can listen to a secular radio station and driving through the South, and they got advertisements for their youth groups playing through the radio.
Right.
And you're like, what the heck? In California, that would never fly.
Right. When you live in a Christian culture, whether it be the United States 40, 50 years ago, probably at the peak of evangelicalism in the United States, and it was, even if, you know, as our friend Andy said over the weekend, you go to church because if you don't, you're going to hell. It was just like, if you want to sell cars in this town in Alabama, you better go to church because otherwise no one's buying a car from you. So, but it becomes so ubiquitous. Well, it's easy to then lead with stuff like Calvary and the cross and stuff like that. And I think a lot of Christians really don't understand how little a good portion of the United States is. Not only do they not believe, they have zero clue about the Bible, like zero. You grew up, if you're my age, if you're 50 plus, you grew up in a world where Old Testament stories were pretty much ubiquitous. It was known even if you didn't go to church. It was in this, you know who Noah was, you knew who David and Goliath were, all that kind of thing. That is not the case now. That was even a shock in our our quote unquote small town of about 65,000 when we were doing our assessment of the number of people in our own town, where we think of us as the Bible Belt of California, who didn't go to church and actually didn't know much about the Bible. And so, yeah, when you're trying to witness to people who don't know anything about Christianity, let alone care about religion, and pretty much live in a secular, non-religious world, don't think about God, I don't think leaning in on the supernatural resurrection is the thing you need to be leaning into. That's kind of, now again, talk about it on Sunday, and if someone's really off put by it, then that's fine. Otherwise take them to a different service. Yeah. Don't go on Easter if they're going to be offended by it. But I think by the same token, somebody who's not a believer and maybe knows nothing about Christianity, you talk them into going to church on Easter, I think they know what they're getting into. But there's no need to be using words like Calvary, which is funny because most people that I hear when they mean to say cavalry, meaning soldiers on horses, they say Calvary and then vice versa. So it's one of those words that's usually said pronounced incorrectly. Anyway, and then certainly not the blood of Jesus, because I mean, whoever was complaining about that, I mean, that is like very small segment of Protestantism that goes on and on about the blood of Jesus. I don't know about if it's big in the Roman Catholic Church. I know they're very, very literal on communion and whatnot, but who talks about that? I mean, so anyway, except Pentecostals do. I know the Pentecostals do because I've sat in those services. But anyway,
Well, and again, I'm more of a Golgotha fan myself, so.
all right. Do we want to do another beer?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do it. Seems a little bit hazier so far.
All right. Beer number 2. R&D 41.
Brewed with the exact same hop blend as the previous beer.
I wonder if this is like White Labs, where they're just slightly off.
Not much.
Where they're trying to... I mean, it is R&D, so they're experimenting. Looks a little hazier from what I remember. A little more opaque.
Yeah.
Smells good.
This is what I got from the one from Dust Bowl. Like, it's a little bit hazier, but it still is pretty strong West Coast forward.
That one's got a little bit more like pineapple flavor on the back.
I think they're both pretty darn tasty, and I'm really sad that I couldn't order any on tap.
Damn. Shit about 2 4 Damn.
Well, if anybody listening to this would like to try the R&Ds, go up to Russian River yourself.
I wonder if you can get it from their store online.
Maybe.
Oh, you have to check that.
I've only done it once, and I just got Elder. But
Okay, I have just a really... maybe it'll just be a quick hot topic. It's me just really airing a grievance. So, like I said, we're trying to herd cats on getting together for Easter. And really, Nick and I are the only ones that really practice Easter. And so, if you're a family member and you hear this, I'm not really that mad about it, but I was a bit chapped the other day. Well, I am ticked about it, but not like super mad, but it's I find it off-putting. Why is it not cultural appropriation with what the culture's done to Christianity and Easter, to where it's become a non-Christian holiday with Easter bunnies and eggs? Like, if you're going to do Easter, then it should be in my house. Because I'm actually the one who believes in it. What the hell? Right? Same with Christmas. It's just been appropriated. It's not on the list of cultural appropriation, which I'm not a big believer in, or I don't get worked up over it. But if we're going to get worked over it, then stop non-Christian people appropriating my holidays.
what I will say to that, though, is, like, why is Easter Sunday one of the most prominent and well-populated church services? And it's because the people with kids want to let those kids go there afterwards as well. So, right. I mean, if it pulls them in, then I'll give them that.
I say I don't. What's hard? I look at it from the family aspect that you're talking about, Tim. Where I don't necessarily. I don't know. When growing up for me and my family, and this is just kind of how I am, is I still believe in the nuclear family, and that's just how my family was growing up. Like I don't have great relationships with my aunts and uncles and
Right.
cousins and all that kind of stuff. Like, and around this area, that's fairly uncommon because we have really big families in this area. And they have really good relationships with all the people that are around. And my family's also very diverse in their religious beliefs. We don't want to step on toes and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, so when it comes to the nuclear stuff, we always did what was what we just wanted to do for that day or whatever. So I don't know. I get also the part where it's just like we just want to do what we want to do, and so I get that aspect, and that's probably I don't know. I feel like
I don't know. I just feel like if I'm gonna go to the trouble of doing stupid Easter eggs in the front of my house, then do me the
Solid of being there.
it's not.
So wait, are you still hosting the egg hunt thing?
I think we're gonna do the egg hunt here. We did it here last year.
Oh, and they just don't want to show up a couple hours before to go to church.
Right. Look, it's not. I know some moms get really upset also on Mother's Day about you not coming to church if you don't come to church normally, and it's like a sign of respect thing. It's not respect. I don't find it disrespectful that you don't go to church. One, because even if my fallen self feels that way, that's one of those things you got to just tell yourself, no, this isn't about you. Don't get uppity about it. It's not about respect. If they don't want to come, they don't want to come. It's just a nice gesture for everyone to be like, Tim and Anika, mom and dad really like Easter. Let's make a day of it. This will be the one where we go to see them and go to church and then go to their house and all that kind of stuff. It's just, and I'm sure that's a thing that a lot of parents have to deal with. I would say if you are someone listening to this and you do have to deal with it, again, be sacrificial. I'm not going to make a big deal about this and complain to my kids and say, oh, if you would only come. It's just, but I'm just kind of airing a slight grievance about it.
And you're saying like,
and it does. What I did think about, I was like, of all the things we get upset about, cultural appropriation, no one gives a shit about the two big Christian holidays being turned into just excuses for spending money and spoiling children with just absolutely no. It's a banal holiday with no meaningfulness attached to it other than a fucking bunny rabbit, and we're just like, oh, we're gonna go along with that. In France, by the way, it's not a bunny rabbit, it's a flying bell.
The fuck?
I think it has to do with Notre Dame, one of the cathedrals. But yeah, it's interesting how if you're listening to this and you think all of Christianity or countries that do that, no. Bunny rabbits is an American thing. So, and I don't really know, and I don't care about how bunny rabbits came about, but again, we get upset about this stuff and of cultural appropriation, and we just sit here and take it in the teeth. I get it, and it's up to us to make sure it's meaningful and religious. We can still do that, but
well, and you say that, but meanwhile, Starbucks gets hit around Christmas time because they took snowflakes and Christmas trees off of their cups, and everybody got all upset.
Yeah,
because they were like, "You're taking away the meaning of Christmas." Christians were the ones that were upset about it.
I know.
They were like, "How dare you? You're taking away the message of Christ off of the cups of Starbucks cups by making them all solid red." I don't know why I had like the sound there.
At least they kept the blood of Christ on the cup.
Yeah, that's the color of our invitations that we're sending out.
Crimson red.
Yeah, but I can understand that frustration, especially for, I think that maybe for some parents out there, and I'm not saying it's you, but like, you feel almost kind of like you have to lean in for the family that's coming over into the cheap, especially when the holiday means so much to us, right? Like it's something that means a lot to us, and meanwhile you got to put on this other thing that you don't give two shits about and you could just deal without. You're just like, yeah, the Easter bunny, the Easter eggs, like that's just a fun thing to do on this day, but really the thing that we should be focusing on this entire day is the resurrection and the joy that brings us through that,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's something on my mind. We're now a week out, so now's not the time to be making a big deal about it. I think it's something I'll try to remember sometime later in the year, and just when, let's say, we're planning for other holidays, because that's the other thing. You're Colton. You mentioned your family's all kind of spread around now, so you don't have that issue as much. I'm not one that the whole day doesn't have to be spent at our house. That's not my thing, but I think I will at some point say, hey, you know what? It would mean something if you guys if you're going to make a big deal about it, I mean, frankly, I'd rather them go out of their way for Easter than Christmas, because again, Christmas is the start of the story, but the start of the story is meaningless without the end of the story, and so Easter would be the one I could do without going to church and taking them to church on Christmas, and having Will Ferrell talk about sweet baby Jesus, but this is for the Christian holidays. This is by far my wife's and I favorite holiday, but we've never mentioned it. So, and in fact, I haven't had this conversation with my wife yet because she's been busy all this week since I've gotten back from our trip, and I think the Friday morning or right before I left, she dropped it on. Yeah, they're still trying to figure out, and they might go to so and so's house, and I kind of just looked at her and nodded my head, and then like she went to work, and I thought, wait a minute, and just
internalized.
Yeah, and they're like, wait,
It's been stewing over.
and it
I need somebody to talk to about this.
who do I air my grievances with? So
The
anyway,
5 people that listen to this podcast.
my wife will find out on Twitter. Somebody's upset on Podbean. Or says this, somebody on Podbean says you're upset. Okay. Main topic. Easter. We're going to actually talk about Easter. Before we get into what we're going to talk about this year, I do want to mention, once again, do I still have it up? I do. Oh no, did it go away? Maybe the magazine went out of it. No, never mind. Oh no, that's too bad. Well, last year we mentioned, for our Easter episode, we did read an article by, I think it was a monk, wasn't it, or a Catholic priest? Anyway, it was called Prayers for Judas. I'm on the website now. It's not coming up. I don't think it's because my internet's dead. So maybe the magazine's defunct. If I can find it, I will post it on the website. Anyway, he wrote a pretty meaningful essay, just talking about all the things that Judas went, and just kind of imagining the guilt and that Judas was feeling in his final hours, final days after he'd given up Jesus. And so that moved both Colton and I, because I think a lot of us just assume that Judas went to hell, and the Bible doesn't say that at all. And there's a lot of scholarship that says Judas was doing it for political reasons. He could have very much realized as soon as what he had done isn't what he thought he was getting himself into. There's also some theories that I've read that are very compelling, that he didn't mean to hand them over in the way that Jesus got crucified or to the authorities. He was trying to jumpstart Jesus to actually do what he thought Jesus was going to do, which was, start this revolution, and that didn't happen. So all that to say, I think having a good perspective on Judas, that yes, even Judas is someone who Jesus died for, even though he, according to the Gospels, led to his demise. That's how we have to go through life. And so reflecting on that this Easter weekend, I think is always a good thing to reflect on. This year we're going to talk a little bit more just big picture about the depiction of the cross, Jesus' death, the resurrection, and kind of just so that when you're reading it this weekend, maybe at your church, you have a bigger picture of and a more historic background on what the Bible actually says, what it doesn't say. Because, again, we've got a lot of myths that have been built up, which are fine. It's fine to have myths built up into religion. We have myths about being Americans. Myths get built in. It doesn't make them wrong. But I think Colton and I always want to make sure people are getting a more maybe academic view of what the Bible says, what it doesn't, maybe where it contradicts itself, and just, again, it's not in any way to minimize or make one not believe the gospel, but just have a bit more educated understanding of it. So, Colton, you want to give a background on the 4 books and maybe how they're different?
Yeah, we've been over this in the podcast. Well, we've been doing this for almost 2 years now. But I feel like it's been a while since we talked about the Gospels.
Yeah.
Trying to make it brief as much as possible. The 4 Gospels, you have the 3 that are called the Synoptic Gospels. The reason why they're called the Synoptics is they're fairly similar to one another. You have Mark, which we have the oldest manuscripts from. They usually say that oldest manuscripts probably showed up around 40 to 50 AD. Those ones are... that's a really fast-moving book. The way that you can remember them is based off of the 4 beasts of the apocalypse. I know that seems like a weird way to remember them, but it's the reference that a lot of biblical scholars use for the 4 different Gospels. And so you have Mark, which is the lion, so that moves very quickly. Jesus is kind of really fast. If you're looking, you could probably finish the entire Gospel of Mark in one sitting, no problem. And they kind of say that he roars, I'm here, and then boom, it's like he's crucified, and then it's over. There's no resurrection story in Mark, which is important to know. Oldest manuscripts don't have a resurrection story in Mark. That being said, it doesn't mean that there wasn't a resurrection. Again, all of this is a lot of oral. A lot of this is oral tradition. Before it finally gets written down, there's lots of theories as to why Mark doesn't have a resurrection story, and a lot of them basically are still saying that yes, there's probably this acknowledgement that there is a resurrection, but it was left to the orator to kind of expand upon that in their own way at the end, and it was just kind of like a bow on the end of that. Now, the reason why I mentioned that about Mark is because Matthew and Luke both use Mark as a source. That's vastly agreed upon by biblical scholars, is that they use the book of Mark in order enough to write Matthew and to write Luke. Our oldest manuscripts of Matthew and Luke come out around the same time. You're looking at about 70 to 80 AD. Those ones round off our Synoptic Gospels. Matthew is the man, the 4 beasts of the apocalypse are the full. You have the man. And that's because Jesus is portrayed as being this man. Moses is often what they're trying to relate it to. There's arguments that suggest that Jesus is supposed to be presented as Moses, and that Matthew is actually a scripture written for Jews. So there's a lot of references to the Old Testament and that kind of stuff, and Moses and David throughout Matthew, which, if you know about Judaism, those are the 2 biggest guys in Judaism, is Moses and David. And so from there, and he's portrayed as a man, like there's kind of things that are around that. And then Luke is the ox, is the idea of the ox. Luke is also the first book before Acts. So there are 2 book parts. So Luke is the first half, and then Acts is the second half. So after the resurrection, then you have Acts, and then that tells the story. There's a scholar that has apparently assimilated all of this information, and he laid it out for some benefactor that we don't know. And again, like I said, those came out at about the same time. And it's the ox, Jesus' burden bearing in this scripture. This is, a lot of people view that this was more geared towards the Gentiles, because again, this was a guy who's going to come and take your burdens. He was going to be with you under the burden of shame and slavery and all this kind of stuff. You have women mentioned more than in any other gospel in Luke. And yes, and a lot of, in Matthew, you have the Sermon on the Mount. In Luke, you have the Sermon on the Plain, right? Like, he is there amongst the people, and those symbols are not lost.
Right.
And it's throughout Luke that you have that kind of stuff going on, where it's constantly, Jesus is constantly in the trenches with people, and that kind of stuff.
Matthew is blessed are the poor in spirit. And Luke is blessed are the poor. It's a physical. It's poor, blessed are the poor.
Yeah. And so those are kind of those things where, so that's where Luke gets that. With Matthew and Luke, there's debate out there on whether or not they used a different source or not. Some people believe that the source is called Q.
Q, yeah.
So there's a Q source that they believe, because Matthew and Luke are fairly similar to each other. They have a lot of the same stories that Mark doesn't have. And so it's almost like there's another source that's just missing. There's no transcripts or manuscripts of a Q source, but the assumption is that they had some other source material to which both of them would have been able to pull from. And then the last one is John. John is a very interesting book. I've talked about it before on this podcast a couple of times. It is biblical scholar consensus that anything that Jesus says, like if you open your book and your Bible and what Jesus said is in red, and we know therefore that Jesus said it. It is pretty much the consensus of biblical scholars that anything that it says in John that's in red, Jesus probably didn't actually say. Like, he didn't say that word for word.
Right.
People don't necessarily think that about Mark, Matthew, and Luke. They do, however, believe that the length of Jesus' mission in John is more accurate than Mark, Matthew's, and Luke's.
Yeah,
Mark,
because his
Matthew's,
is
and
one.
Luke's, mission is about 6 months.
Yeah.
Then in John, it's about 3 years. And those are marked by his travels to and from Jerusalem or to the.
You have.
All right. You're good.
Okay, so and just traveling to the different, religious activities that the Jews practiced at that time. His is often equated with being, when we talk about the beasts, it's the eagle. And so there's kind of this weird removal from the situation that's going on, right? Like, it's more of a narrative of him going to see John the Baptist, but then when he sees John the Baptist's narrative in John is completely different. And so there is argument out there. It's not a huge argument, so you can take it or leave it. But as somebody who studies drama on a regular basis, there is speculation that John's gospel could have been a Greek drama that was actually performed and that people would watch and see the crucifixion of Christ. And that's seen through the way that people act, the conversations that they have. It's no more than two people at a time. And that was Greek drama, where it's like, okay, and there's lots of places where you can see it. So like the lady at the well, he comes and sees the lady at the well. There's the lady at the well. She's crying, blah, blah, blah. Here comes Jesus.
Right.
She goes away. In come the disciples. Oh, blah, 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 blah. The disciples go away. In walks another person. And it's kind of this weird thing where it's always Jesus, somebody else, or somebody else, and somebody else, and somebody else goes away, and then Jesus walks in. And so that's fairly common there. There's a lot of symbolism, a lot of that kind of stuff. And then there's almost kind of like, again, if you study Greek drama, there's almost like these chorus lines. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God,
Yeah.
and the Word was with God. That doesn't exist anywhere else in...
Right. It's very dramatic, much like
It's all
Revelation.
dramatic. And like I said,
it's this big. It's a pageant. It's a production.
Yes, and then like you get to his death, and again it's Pilate comes in, and again this is where where you have Pilate, and he's like, oh, he's being tried. Okay, then Jesus like gets up and leaves, and then he goes and he turns to the crowd. Who do you want, Jesus or Barabbas? And then they come back out, and then him, and all this kind of stuff. It's very much this kind of this drama of coming back and forth. They talk about the crowds a lot and the crowd's response.
So I'm going to interject real quick. Your thing about Pilate doing the whole thing, and then hand wringing. Oh, should I do this?
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
And then,
yeah.
and presenting it to the crowd. The guy we listened to, Dan McClellan, made a great point. He said Pilate had no problem slaughtering Jews and even Christians later by the thousands in the street. There's absolutely no historical basis for him like hand wringing over killing this one Jew guy who people are claiming he would have been just like done with him. In fact, it's actually more the opposite. If Pilate thought he was going to be the cause of unrest, he would have ended that quickly. He would have had no problem putting Jesus to death.
Well, and if
The one thing the Romans did not want, and everybody in charge of a province, was unrest. You can do anything you want. You can be a Jew, you can be a Babylonian, you can be whatever in your certain area, as long as you don't cause problems for the empire and pay your taxes.
and then what you're getting is the oldest manuscripts that we have of John are 100, 110, 120 years past the death of Christ.
Well, that would make John an Old Testament figure. He lived until he was a very
Yeah,
old
I know,
man.
right? Yeah, especially when everybody's life expectancy was 40. And so so John's gospel is, again, if you sit there and you're like, and there's a lot of powerful scripture in John.
Okay, here we go. And Alec, you can chime in anytime.
Oh, I know. I'm just listening because this is a lot of perspective on literature that I've never looked at, but it makes a lot of sense from understanding of literature and looking at Shakespearean plays of how it sets up for a sequence of events to happen before you move on to your next part of the play, your next part of the set. And we were talking about the I am statements and how, like, the water to wine, or even when Jesus heals the man, and it's all a perfect setup for a play to be shown at that point.
Yeah, and also here's something that I would like to say on that, where when I say that Jesus didn't necessarily say those things word for word, again, he may have said those things. I'm just saying, and those events may have definitely happened. I'm not saying that that people just came up with this stuff out of nowhere and they're like, we need to add some fluff to this material or whatever. And that is possible. But I'm not saying that those things didn't happen. This is just the general consensus as to what is it that the biblical scholars believe as far as the evidence that has been provided to them, and this is just how you create. This is what you do when you do research. You got to find out this kind of stuff, and so.
Well, it's not like it's a court case either, where we can have someone that's typing down everything that's happening, or videotapes that can show you everything that's occurring.
Well, and I could give you this information, and if you are a certain someone, you could sit there and report me to a pastor that's trying to hire me as a youth pastor and say that guy shouldn't be hired because that was all that I had said. I was just like, oh man, I had said that Mark doesn't have a resurrection narrative, and I said that what Jesus says in John is not exactly. People have agreed that that's not what he said. So, and they're powerful statements. Like I said, the I am statements, they're really great. But it doesn't take away from their power or anything like that. But do also be careful when you're using that stuff, because maybe 20 years from now, it could turn out that it's like, oh yeah, we did find out that this was a play and a lot of this stuff is just fluff. And then people will question the legitimacy of the book of John, and that kind of stuff. So, and what are you going to do? Is your faith going to shatter from that? Like, you're like, I've been telling people that John 3:16 is the only way, and apparently Jesus didn't even say that. And which, don't get me wrong, I think John 3:16 is like one of the best pieces of scripture in there, as far as it is the idea of what the gospel is all about, that God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, and that whoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life. And so there's great stuff that comes from that. So I don't know, but those are the gospels. I tried to keep it brief, but
Yeah, there's no way to keep it brief.
I know,
but it's important to point that all out, because I mentioned Dan McClellan a few minutes ago. I mentioned to Colton on our trip this weekend. I'm finding it harder and harder to listen to his podcast. His is Data Over Dogma. You might enjoy it. I just find it a little too. It seems to be increasingly a podcast by a Bible scholar who does not believe in the Bible and is in fact going out of his way to do everything to discredit that, and that's fine. He's got a right to do that. I find that a strange. I find that a strange profession. It's almost like you decide to become a Shakespeare professor, but actually go out try to prove that it was Jonathan Marlowe or whatever Marlowe's name.
For trying to prove that it's all bullshit.
It was actually Marlowe that wrote Shakespeare, not Shakespeare at all, and just gloss over the great literature that was written. So I kind of listen to what he has to say in spurts, depending on what kind of topic he's talking about. But I think it's important to mention that we do need to acknowledge that these things don't all line up. Like one thing they mentioned, Jesus died for 3 days. That's not actually how if you do the math. I think for at least two of the Gospels, it's like a day and a half or maybe 2 days, and of course
it's like 2 days. I think John's the one that it actually has 3 days.
Right.
Because John has him die on the morning. So here's another where it's like you have like the symbolic kind of elements. John has him die on the day that the lambs are being slaughtered for Passover. That
right.
Because you got to put the blood on there, and so he's the sacrificial lamb with the lambs being slaughtered at that one. And he dies at 3 when the lambs are laid on the altar. Which we know a pastor that really likes to lean into that story.
Yeah.
I've heard that one probably. I've been to several of those.
Well, and if you bring back like the time frame of the different books too, that's a perfect little area between when things have been established to go and really create a play that can really draw people in and to start these yearly
100%.
Traditions like we have now.
Well, yeah. Okay, perfect point. What we've talked about so often on the show is stop looking at the Bible as this historic document that's perfect, every word. There's some guy who's Jesus is in his ear, the Holy Spirit's in his ear, telling him to write down every word, and every word's perfect. Look, there are contradictions even within the Gospels. They don't all line up. They're not contradictions. There are, let's take the most... There are eyewitness viewpoints that are being written down, whether it be a Q source. Isn't there another one like M source or something? I think there's another type of source. There are people who are relying on, who are writing down their reflections, their memories. I do believe in the inerrancy of the world. I do believe that what the stories are being told are not misleading. Ultimately, the thing that is important at the end of the day is Jesus was put to death. He was put in a tomb, and he rose again, and that's the essential part of the gospel. The other stuff around that, I don't, we take for granted all these stories of people throughout history of being exactly what was reported, when quite often they might have been embellishments based on whether or not that person really liked Abraham Lincoln or didn't like Abraham Lincoln, or liked George Washington or didn't, or really liked guess what? Anything you read about Charlemagne, they probably really liked Charlemagne because Charlemagne was paying for them to write down everything, and he would have killed them if they didn't. So does that mean all of our history is myth over people like Charlemagne? No. And in fact, one of the strengths that I find of the four Gospels, the older I've gotten and understanding that they are different and in some ways contradict each other, is it's four people, as Colton was putting out, who are kind of putting their own spin on what they think the importance of the gospel is. Yeah. Luke's looking at it from a doctor's point of view. He's focused on the needs of people.
Yeah.
Matthew's more of like a spiritual thing. John's this whole other big, like, major spiritual thing, like, and dramatic. And Mark's is more of just Mark's is more of a...
He's a cut to the chase kind
kind of guy, but to this, let's dive into this other part of what we're going to talk about tonight. So let's call it a theory about Mark's version of the gospel, that it is of Jesus going from the point that he goes in front of Pilate till he gets crucified, that it's basically, if you're reading this and you're a Roman citizen or you're just a person of Rome, you know how Caesars are coronated. That what Mark is actually doing is a very subversive tale of Jesus being an inverted coronation, so to speak, of how Caesar would be coronated. So in Mark 15:16, the Praetorian Guard is gathered around Jesus when he's at Pontius Pilate's palace. That mimics what a Praetorian Guard gathering around Caesar would be before he goes out for his coronation. Jesus is given a purple robe, a scepter, that's in Matthew 27:29, a crown of thorns, while being mocked by these Praetorian Guard, "Hail, King of the Jews." That's in Mark 15:17 through 18. That very much mimics Caesar given the robe of Jupiter, a scepter, and an olive branch crown, while the claim is saying, "Hail Caesar." Then we get to Jesus being paraded through the streets of Jerusalem to his death, which mimics the royal procession through the streets of Rome, while Caesar's being led by a sacrificial bull. And in fact, this leaves that out. There's a guy who's sacrificing himself when Jesus is being walked around. It's what's his name, who picks up Jesus's crop. Because he can't continue to carry it. Then we have the procession.
Simon.
It's Simon.
I know it's the same. It's the same name as another guy.
It's a different Simon, but yeah, it's a Simon.
I was like, which one is it?
Then we have Jesus arriving at Golgotha, which is the place of the skull in Mark 15:22, which mimics the procession which arrives at the Capitolian Hill, which is the head hill in Rome. Jesus is offered wine of myrrh, wine mixed with myrrh, although that is one I think that's in Mark. That's what it is. I think in John or one of the other books it's something else, but it's wine and something else. Caesar's given a bowl of wine mixed with myrrh, which he sacrificially refuses and pours it out on the ground. That's his way of saying I'm going to be a man of the people and not Caesar, which is all BS. Jesus is sacrificed. A bull is slaughtered for Caesar. Jesus had two criminals crucified on his right and left. Caesar climbs the steps of the Temple of Jupiter with his royal officials on his right and left. And then crowds mock Jesus and insult him. Crowds proclaim Caesar, acclaim Caesar, and heap praises on him. So again, it's this inverted notion of the cross being something opposite of what the world looks at, which is this hailing of a king. Now, I did a lot of reading on the internet. I'm reading from one guy's Substack on this. There's been books written about this. I wouldn't say that this is like a common thought throughout seminary. If you're going to go to seminary, you're not going to hear this. But it's not also crackpot theory either. And I think it's an interesting way of just kind of looking at, again, to the John thing of we're telling a pageant.
Yeah.
One can look at Mark's trying to tell a pageant as well, but he's trying to tell a different one that we don't think about necessarily, and we might be reading something into it. But it's certainly possible that it was being a tale being told. And I think the problem with secular people or scholars in particular, is they look at that and see, there's an agenda, so there must have been a political agenda. Where no, he's using symbolism that people are going to understand in order to convey a story.
Well, then you could even pull into the idea that Judas was the person that stabbed him in the back, just like Brute did to Caesar himself.
I didn't even think of that.
And it's just funny because it just follows that same narrative all the way through until he's eventually stabbed in the back by the person that you thought was close to you.
Nah, Brutus did it for Rome.
For the Republic.
Well, I mean, you could bring in the politics of it. Brutus did it for Rome.
Yeah.
Judas may have done it for the politics that you discussed earlier, too.
Yeah, that Judas was doing. He was doing it. I think that's fairly well known that Judas. I think that's a. We can say that Judas was doing it for the sake of what he thought was a return of the Jewish kingdom and overthrowing the oppressiveness of the Romans, and for sure that's what he was hoping Jesus was going to be. Like a lot of Jewish leaders had been throughout the occupation, going back to the Babylonians. There was a big uprising, I think, before Jesus, the Maccabees. So there had been a lot of moments where the Jews thought somebody was going to come along, and this was going to be the person and the group of people that are going to go overthrow overthrow the Romans. And I think Judas clearly was hoping for that. So,
Yeah, I think I think it's great when we look at these things, like the connections between Mark and and his crucifixion story, and with Caesar's. I think that that's definitely not without being in the realm of possibilities. I think that probably is the thought process behind a lot of the stuff that is referenced throughout Mark. As to this sequence, people would have known this, and we need to acknowledge that there are things that people are going to pick up on in that particular time that we have no clue what is going on exactly, as to what actually is happening. But yeah, and it kind of breaks your heart a little bit, because it's a mocking process, right? It's Jesus is, and I'm not even sitting there, and we talked about how John, we can embellish this and that kind of stuff, but as we look through, and like it says here in Matthew and it says in Luke, this is probably what happened to Jesus.
yeah.
And it was, again, people knew who this guy was. People in Rome were afraid of that Jesus guy. And they don't talk about that in scriptures, okay? Is that there's this guy that's in this area, and he says they say that he's going to be the new king of the world.
He's Donald Trump.
And the Jews, because the Jews made up, and this was a violent area.
Yeah.
During the time, they were, kind of having this thing going on, and the Romans, as much as they won a lot of battles, and conquered a lot of territory, they were always afraid of new uprisings coming up, right? You have Hannibal. You have, right, Hannibal?
Yeah.
You have, the Gauls up in the north. You have all of these different groups. The Persians have been pretty much wiped out by that point, because Alexander just said, yeah, we're not dealing with this anymore.
Yeah.
But really, there was also a lot of unrest in that area. And so out of nowhere, there's this new king that's going to come up. And Rome and the people of the empire that were of that Hellenistic age were very afraid of that. And so people knew who this was, especially if you were a Roman Praetorian in the area. And so when they got their hands on him, they showed no mercy with their mocking. And that's told through all four Gospels. To where, again, yes, you have the Praetorian Guard that gathers around him. They beat him. They make fun of him by giving him the scepter and his robe and crown. I even think that maybe one of the things that they're missing is still, I'm pretty sure, and you can say if I'm wrong, and maybe I'm reading into it a little bit too much now, is there's the waving of the olive branches, and I wonder if almost that kind of also, because people in the streets will wave the olive branches, and I wonder if that has anything to do with the beatings that he also received.
Oh, yeah.
From his whips and from his, but they also did that to other people before they crucified them. The royal procession, that kind of stuff going through the streets is a very humiliating, very sickening experience that Jesus went through. I do think that Tim and I talked about last year about how people often focus too much on Friday. But I think it is very humbling as believers to focus on Friday sometimes and do understand that it is his sacrifice that pays for our sins. It is his blood that pays for our sins. And yes, we do have the miracle and the joy of Sunday, but also it is a good idea and a good time to reflect on the horror of an injustice to our God. And it should break our hearts what happened on Friday. And for us to feel joy and relief from Sunday. So, I don't know.
I agree. I think focusing too much on the Friday can be deleterious, but I also think it's Christmas doesn't work without Easter, and Easter doesn't work without Christmas, and so goes the sacrificial death on the cross. If Jesus had just died in, I think, less painful, humiliating ways, the resurrection wouldn't have mattered so much. And why it's important for us as believers, and I think my problem with the cross is we remember the cross, we think about what Jesus did, but what we fail to remember is we're supposed to mimic that as much as possible, not physically, but in the choices we make in terms of, to use the church phrase that we probably shouldn't use, but as we Christians like to say, die to oneself. And so it doesn't mean literally sacrificing ourselves. It doesn't mean like, oh, I'm going to go off to war and fight for my country, and that's me dying to myself. No, probably not. But it means me, like I said earlier, not getting upset with my children because they don't take Easter seriously, and I really would like them to. You know what? Get over it. Don't make an issue out of it. Bring it up. Do it in a loving way. But don't sit around and pout and say, "Oh, if you guys clearly don't love me or respect me because you won't go to church with me on Sunday," and all those little things that we have to self-check with ourselves on a daily basis and say, "Does this really matter? Am I really? Is this worth upsetting someone? The person that I think is aggrieving me." Is it really going to build bridges? Is it going to be peacemaking? Is it going to be loving, forgiving if I make a big deal about this? Or is it something I can just be the one person in life? Yeah, this person's an asshole at work, but you know what? I'm going to be the one person in their life that isn't going to give them trouble. Maybe they live at home with a bunch of jerks. Maybe they grew up in a family where their parents were jerks. And that's what makes them tick, and you don't understand that. And you're going to be the person that just continually just says, you know what? I can take it. I can take it. And so I think I agree. That's where the cross is fundamental to remember. And I'm not someone who, I don't go to Good Friday services. So,
well, I think too, just going off of what Colton was talking about earlier, just with his own things that he's going through. We all go through pain in our life, and sometimes I don't think we realize that the pain is what bridges us into being more like Christ in everything that we do. Because just to even think about the amount of pain that Christ was going through on his way up to be persecuted and to be killed, like our pain that we're going to be anticipating from our anxiety, from our stress, everything that happens around us, even our coworkers that we may not like all that pain builds us to be better people. But it all depends on really how you look at it, just like the poem that you're reading. Is we can look at it in one way of pain is going to be detrimental to us, or pain can be something that's going to build us to be more like Christ over time. Because that's what Christ was thinking about all this time, is the pain of all the suffering of these people that he's going to be taking upon as he goes onto the cross. Whereas we can't even fathom what that pain's like. But as we go through each day, these painful things that we go through, do we have a specific mindset that would be more like what Christ was going through as well? Which I think is hard to do because we don't like pain as humans. Pain is hard for us. But pain also allows for some of the most growth that we'll ever experience as well. And it will make us more wise, just like everything, David, right? Everything under the sun.
Yeah.
And the reason why he was so wise in his age was because he went through all of this shit. And he realized none of this is worthwhile. None of this pain is worth it. And even Job went through all this pain, but he was built differently because of it. And built more like what Christ would be calling us to do, just like how he was on the cross.
Yeah, I think that it's a growing experience for us, and I think that there is a good reminder of. Yeah, I think sometimes we can get really comfortable here. We can get comfortable in our stuff, and I hope that Jesus, for what it's worth, and we think of this as a man, and this might be a weird thing to say, but I really hope that even if he lived in such a tough time, I hope that he enjoyed his time on earth, you know? I hope that he saw this as a good place full of people that had the potential to be good. You know, he walked amongst us, and he had to die at the hands of such a brutal, insane death, but I hope that he found in that there was something worth saving here. And I believe that he did, and I believe that God believes that too. And so I hope that he had joyful moments, good times with friends, was able to see people that also showed him love just in the same way that he showed love to other people. And those are the things that we need to hold on to too, and that's why I think that it's also important to pay attention to Sunday. Where I think that, again, it's that hope to hold on to, that there is life after all that pain.
Yeah.
And so I think that is great.
Yeah.
Do we need to say our third beer before you take it from there, Tim? Click. Click, click.
All right, our third beer.
Our third beer is...
really bitter after those previous two. Holy hell.
Oh, is that what happened?
Yeah,
I was like looking at...
Wow.
I was looking at Tim and
I don't remember that being that bitter.
I thought he was going over alcohol, and I was like, it's 7.7.
That's not bad.
No.
We are having Deli by Dingy, which we've had on the show before, I'm pretty sure.
We've had it before, and it's one of our favorites, but usually I've had it with another, like, more West Coast profile. So these first two were very juicy and I would say more East Coast fruity profile, and they were delicious. So this just had my first taste, just wow. It was an assault on the palate, but it's getting much better.
We're big fans of Moonlight Brewing Company. Deli by Dingy, it's delicious. We drank a couple of them this last weekend. We bought 3 different 4-packs of it this weekend.
Yeah.
Colton bought 2, Tim bought 1. So we're excited to have it. It's definitely one we want to share with our friends. So
Yeah, it's pretty good.
yeah. But yeah, so that's our third beer of the week.
Third and final beer.
We kept the ABV pretty low today.
We did.
What have you guys been drinking on here?
Well, what? Freaking drink by 420 or whatever was like 9.
9 and
Yeah.
God.
2, 9.3.
I was like, golly.
I think we need a dump truck of the gods.
We've
I
done
know, we did that
before.
once. That was a
we
mistake.
we did thank you very much, and that's when I had to.
Stay here.
Yeah, that's when I had to stay here, and I had water polo practice early in the morning, and then I had to go to stinking the training or whatever for school.
Oh,
I think
gosh.
Nolan had the other one on an episode, and that got him really pretty toasty. And he followed up with alcohol later.
Yeah, dump truck of the gods.
Oh, I remember him coming into the house. He was not feeling it at that point. Did you guys have whiskey afterwards?
Not I. Said
he did.
yuck.
That was his first, yeah. Okay, so... Wait.
Sorry, Easter hope.
All right. I'll finish with one more thought, and then we can. Mine's not quite maybe as hopeful as we need to end on, so then you guys can maybe be a little more hopeful. Just a reminder: Jesus died on the cross not so we could be martyrs and feel sorry for ourselves and think about all the things that people do to us. That's not what it's about. He died on the cross because of the things down deep inside that we don't want to talk about, that we don't even tell the closest people in our lives, that never ever get muttered aloud. Our spouses never find about, not because, just because that's, I think just everybody's got that. That is what he died for.
Damn, what kind of intrinsic thoughts do you
Gosh.
have?
I think we all have those things.
I mean, I think what people need to understand about all of this too is he did it out of love for us.
There's someone I'd like to murder. Sorry. Yeah,
No, you're good.
It's you. Yeah, that's why he's apologizing.
That's why I had that second beer. He's like, oh!
Yeah, there's someone I've had murderous thoughts about. I've according to Jesus, I've been guilty of one of the 10 Commandments in my heart.
If you've thought of it, then you've done it.
Yeah. So anyway, go ahead, continue.
I mean, it's just what we've been told all our lives is, oh, Jesus did this out of love.
Suicide. Holy hell.
Wow.
I guess it's not a good one after the start to the podcast today.
But have you done it? No. So
That's right.
going back to what I was saying is, it's the fundamental Christian thing of we've been told to do things out of love, and we're taught to be more Christ-like. He died on the cross out of love for us. Even he went through all of that shit just for the love that he had for his people. And so everything that we do, all these people that we come across that we don't really know, we don't like them or anything like that, like they're there on Sundays. We just have to show them love because it's what Christ did for us. And it's much harder said than done because we don't always want to love the people around us, which I think is where Tim's getting to his intrinsic thoughts on murdering people.
Well, and I'm going to take it a little step further, and I don't think that it's, and I don't think that Tim's just talking about intrinsic thoughts, but I mean, that was one of those things where it's like deep down, there's parts of us that are definitely, that we're broken and we're evil inside sometimes. And some of us don't act on our actions, and some of us do. But that's also what we talked about on this podcast before, is that Jesus Christ died on the cross for every single person on this planet, and that doesn't mean he died for the best of us. He died for the worst of us.
Yeah.
And that's what we've talked about, where whether you like it or not, and again, and I think we talked about it last year, where it's like, if you believe that he died on the cross, then you have to acknowledge that he died on the cross for Jews too. He died on the cross for terrible, terrible, despicable human beings in our world's history that have done terrible atrocities to humankind. And
it's also a hard thing to pull up right now, just with everything that's happened in
100%.
Russia and things like that.
And Russia and Israel and Gaza and Ukraine, in China, hell, in the United States. There's atrocities, terrible things that are happening all over the world. Terrible human beings, but yet God died on the cross for all of them. And so I think that one of the things that hopefully we can take from this Sunday is that we are sitting there and we believe that we have hope, but know that every single person has equal access and opportunity to that hope, to be restored through the blood of Christ. Emphasis on blood of Christ, because that's what's going on the invitations. So
Yeah, going back to what the Gospels say, going into during the time of the crucifixion and immediately after, this is the time of year to reflect on. Jesus was not, he didn't surround himself with superheroes. This is not the Avengers. This is anything but. He's sold out by one of his own for according to what the scriptures say, is a bag of silver. And again, I think it's because I don't think it's because Judas thought Jesus was a turncoat. I think he was trying to push Jesus into finally doing what Judas wanted him to do, which was start a revolution. But let's not forget, according to Jesus's words recorded in Scripture, he builds his church on a guy who's a coward and denies that he had anything to do with Jesus when Jesus is on trial. I had nothing to do with that man. I don't even know who you're talking about. That's kooky talk.
And a guy who even continued to make mistakes after.
And continue to make mistakes
All of
after.
a sudden, we believe that like all of a sudden the Spirit's poured out, and all of a sudden Peter just becomes this amazing, immaculate person. But yet, like we've talked about before on this podcast, him and Paul fight a lot.
Yeah, we talked about it on the last episode we recorded, where Jesus and the Holy Spirit still had to do work on Peter, because it's clear Peter didn't see Gentiles as people who were going to believe or were worthy of believing in Jesus. And so there's this story of him having to have a vision that he doesn't understand until he comes across this Roman centurion named Cornelius. And when they get together, he finally understands, oh, all these things that the Jewish law that I've been told, which is fundamental, and everybody who doesn't follow that is unclean. Yeah, that's not a thing anymore. So even after Jesus has died, he's still figuring out. Again, folks, it's a struggle. This isn't like the light turns on and you start acting like Jesus wants you to. We're trying to figure this thing out. And then we have the story of the doubting Thomas. Jesus is apparently standing there in the room, and he's like, "Yeah, not sure I believe." And Jesus shows him. There's no condemnation of Thomas. I think Jesus understands. Jesus is like, I get it. You're human. This is crazy. And so he doesn't send him away and say, because you didn't believe. He does say, those who didn't know me, who didn't see me in real life and do happen to have that gift of faith, they're going to have even stronger faith than you did, because those of us who are listening to this podcast today, reading the Bible, struggling over it, we have this fundamental belief that this man, 2,000 plus years ago, died. He was the Son of God, died, rose again. Yes, we have that fundamental faith without ever seeing him, and believing that in believing in him, our lives are going to be better, and that the more other people believe in him, the world will be better. Is that it? Are we good?
I think so.
Yeah.
All right, folks. We hope you enjoy Easter. Go to church. Say he is risen to everybody.
He is risen indeed.
Yeah, if they don't say he is risen indeed, punch them. No, don't do that.
Just tell him to go to hell.
Tell him to go to hell.